So hello and welcome everyone to Debra and Peter doing a podcast. And following our discussion of cricket last time round, I've decided to wear one of my favourite Somerset cricket shirts, which is Mondrian inspired, apparently. It only lasted one season, as most shirts do these days, because it's a bit dazzling for the bowlers and pretty tricky to carry off. But in introducing you, Debra, last time we were together, you were on the point of, I don't know if you're going to get angry or animated or what it was, about gender-based clothing expectations. So I'm going to pass that one to you.
Yeah, and that's perfect. You're wearing this bright, colourful, brilliant thing, because it's one of the things that drives me mad, absolutely mad about society. It's about, this whole kind of notion that men wear suits and ties and dark colours and browns and blues and greens and tracksuits, and God forbid a straight man, or any man actually, should wear a dress. It's like, that's absolutely a no-no. And for me, it's like, and you have these women say, like, men shouldn't be wearing dresses, and I'm like, why? Why on earth can't men wear whatever they want to wear? Women can wear whatever they want to wear. Why can't men? And it's like, and also, of course, I think it comes really from sort of Victorian times, because prior to then, men were much more colourful. They were much brighter clothing and bigger patterns and jewelry, and well, certainly slightly better off. I suspect the peasants probably didn't, and it's one of those things that annoys me so much, and it particularly annoys me because what it does is it reinforces this kind of difference, but not in a healthy way. So it's like, because a lot of women's clothing is designed actually to make us weaker. High heels so you can't run, although I love a high heel. Tight skirts so you can't run. It's that sort of thing. It's all sort of, people don't realise how political clothing is, and how anti-feminist clothing is, and how patriarchal clothing is, and how every time as a bloke you conform, you're reinforcing the patriarchy. And yet people feel very uncomfortable about, not people, men find it very, very difficult to change what they wear. I mean, it's one of the things I love about you, Peter, is that you do pretty well, because you wear loads of really bright, in-your-face shirts. It's a shirt. Love to see you in a bright shirt with a skirt, perhaps, and maybe a high-heeled boot. But it's like, and I genuinely struggle to get my head around it. And the interesting thing for me as well, particularly about it, is not so much that men are judging other men for not conforming in terms of what they wear, but they will judge them too. Like, of all the sexes that shouldn't be judging men for wearing female clothing, it should be us. Why shouldn't you wear it? Anyway,
well,
there you go. Make that on.
Thank you for that. I don't mind wearing a colourful shirt, but I think there are bigger battles to fight than my right or expectation to wear a skirt. I've got enough to choose from, and don't get me started on blokes wearing shorts to the office, which is quite popular in the Shoreditch area, particularly when the temperature rises, but I really haven't got my head around at all. So I'm beneath this kind of veneer of flowery shirts. I'm quite conservative and conformist in this environment, I think.
It's trivial, Peter. I know it feels trivial, and especially to men who are just very used and very comfortable with it. But actually, there is an underlying problem with this whole, gender divide about clothing, and how incredibly socially unacceptable it is for men to not conform to what's expected of them. That's really unhealthy. It's an underpinning of toxic masculinity. It reinforces the patriarchy. Anyway.
If you say so.
I do. I absolutely do. So I should be rushing off to buy you. What's your size, Peter?
Size in what?
Anyway, so that was my rant about gender-based clothing. I do think it matters.
And that was an overflow from last time. So what should we talk about today? What's on your mind?
Well, I'm a commissioner on a thing called the Local News Commission, which is a project that's been set up by the Public Interest News Foundation, which is a wonderful organisation. And what they're what they're trying to do is, in this particular local news commission, is have a look at the local news provision, like what the challenges are, what's getting in the way, what's working, how it's changed over time, what it needs to be, done to be different. And I'm learning so much. I mean, one of the reasons I was asked to be on it is because, of course, local charities, local news is really important. You want to get your charity in the local news. You want people locally to be talking about it. You want, we know that local councillors, civil servants, MPs, typically pay a lot of attention to what's written about them in local newsletters and local news outlets. And, there's fewer print versions now, or local broadcast media. And so it's really, really important, which is one of the reasons I was asked to be on it. But when you realise the barriers to it, like the funding model, and how incredibly difficult it is to get the balance between, because when you're asking us, what do you think is the importance of local news? People saying like holding politicians to account and holding the council to account and keeping people informed about what's going on and changes in local planning laws or whatever. But as one of our editors, who runs his own little local news outlet, was saying, the trouble is you could stuff your paper letter full of that stuff and nobody's going to read it, because there's a point at which people are quite, council meetings are quite dull, and the people actually want the Lonely Hearts column and the, Mrs. Edgington from Number 7 with her prize marrow at the WI fate or whatever. It's like, people want those things as well. And the challenge of, people from the outside looking in about what's valuable, what they should be doing versus what people actually want to buy. And it's been a very interesting discussion and debate about, what does it actually mean? And also defining, what does integrity in news mean, actually? It's like, we have these questions, don't we, about the major news outlets, never mind local news. So, yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating.
And when you talk about local news, what do you mean? Do you mean published newspapers and magazines and regional and local sort of news and TV? Or because if I'm trying to think, where do I get my local news from? I mean, rightly or wrongly, and a lot of it does my head in. It's the local Facebook groups. It's people with social media pages and links and kind of communities that are forever telling us whether there's bread in the local co-op or there's a leak on the road, and et cetera, but there are fewer and fewer local papers, aren't there, these days?
There are. Well, we're more focused on so sort of formally delivered local news, but actually, interestingly, local news is increasingly being delivered via modern platforms. So like lots of local news outlets will have a Facebook page, they will have a TikTok page, they will have a YouTube video, so the medium's changing. But we're talking about people whose job it is to go and gather news and information and keep a section of the community informed, engaged, involved, etc., and how you fund that, because there's a massive reluctance for government to fund it, obviously, because you don't want to be straitjacketed. But on the other hand, it's like most of these news outlets earn maybe 25, 70, 80,000 pounds a year to produce whatever the news is, whether it's a newsletter or a TikTok thing or stuff like that. I mean, there's some slightly bigger ones. I mean, we were talking to the editor of the Manchester Evening News just recently. Fascinating, really powerhouse of a woman, passionate about her work, but the interesting thing, because Manchester's big, it's like, so in one sense it's local, but I mean, what's the population or something people, never mind all the outlying sort of areas who would be covered by the Manchester, the Bromley newsletter, much smaller, sort of local news. So yeah, it's been really interesting. And so important to charities.
I was on the front page of the Sevenoaks Chronicle once, and it said "the perfect husband and hero," and there's a picture of me. But unfortunately, the headline related to the story on the other side of the front page.
Yeah, but Peter, I bet you bought that paper and kept it.
I did.
And I bet you waved it.
I suggested to Lady W that they put the wrong headline with the wrong article, but she wasn't having any of it.
Yeah, so much fun.
So what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, at the end of it, as with all commissions, there'll be a report, and the report will make recommendations for well, I don't know what it'll say yet, obviously, because we're only sort of halfway through this whole process, but it will presumably make recommendations for changes in legislation that might help. There are definitely some issues around, so there's a law which says that for any council notice have to be published in print, which
Right.
is fine. But if you can't afford to produce print, you're losing a revenue stream. And that law dates back to, I mean, they did tell us that, I can't remember, but it's hundreds of years old. So there's some regulations that need to be to take away some of the restrictions on how people are able to generate revenue in order to run these news outlets and things like that. So we'll make some recommendations, I suspect, around regulation. We'll make some recommendations to obviously local news outlets themselves about what they could do. So it'll be that sort of thing. But I'm literally immersed in it at the moment. I mean, we haven't really come to conclusions as yet, because we're just on this massive learning curve where we're listening to witnesses and reaching out to audiences. Actually, I've shared a link to a survey with our network at DSC saying, please let us know your view of your local news as a local charity in your area. Does it work for you? Do you use it? That sort of thing. So fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I love finding out things I never knew before.
It does sound really, really interesting. I'm on a group at the moment, which is an advisory board to Common Sense Media, who are a US charity, who they're most known for putting the age ratings on films and all sorts of media across the states. But they're doing bits and pieces over here, and they have a partnership with the NSPCC, particularly in the online safety space. But we've been looking with them at developing media literacy products and classes, and it struck me that there are lots of debates and discussions with increasingly young children about what they should or shouldn't believe on the internet, or they can only look at these things when they get to a certain age. But actually, really good media literacy learning is about the art of critical thinking and helping consumers of news. I mean, it's particularly challenging for younger people, but it's true for all of us, actually, to not simply to see or read something, but then to ask ourselves, and does that make sense or not? So we were talking at our last meeting. They put up the example of, if you say to a class, what's the biggest horse in the world? Then biggest horse. What's the biggest horse in the world? And so if you put that into Google Images or other search engines that are available, various pictures will crop up. How do you then determine if what you're seeing is the biggest horse in the world, or is a very big horse with a shrunken man, or it's the art of asking the right questions and interrogating the news that, as I think, into the future, as we get into a world dominated by artificial intelligence and people looking
But that reminds me of that. It reminds me, Peter, sorry, of that Father Ted sketch. I don't know if you've ever seen it, about the cow, when Father Ted is saying to, I've forgotten his name now, but I've forgotten the name of the actor, but what he's saying, he's holding up a little cow and he's saying, now, this is a tiny cow. That cow in that field over there is far away. I wish I could remember the name of the and I can't. Ardlan Hanlon, isn't it? Or I think is the name of the actor who plays the kind of like slightly less well informed priest in the village. So yeah, it's very funny and very true. Like, perspective. How do you know what's real? It's like, it's quite scary. I mean, we had someone come and do a presentation to us, our leadership team, about AI, because we were trying to learn about it at DSC, obviously. And, most of us really don't know very much, to be fair. And what he did is, as part of his presentation, he did an AI mock-up of me.
Right.
And it was like it freaked me out. I mean, it wasn't particularly like me, to be fair. And I think also he tried to be terribly flattering. I don't think he wanted to AI me exactly as I look in case I got offended. But nonetheless, the fact that he could do that, and it was my voice coming out of this mouth of this person that looked like a real human being, not an AI person. You could tell, but of course it's going to get more and more sophisticated. So kind of like that sort of real fear of it. But actually, friends of ours, me and my partner Andy, our friends, they know quite a lot about this. And Simon was talking very passionately about the power of AI, actually. and that how, that we shouldn't fear it. What we need to do is say it's coming anyway. The Pandora's box is open, it's gonna come. So we just need to be looking at how can we embrace it, how can we also make it safe, how can we make it so that it, isn't going to damage people and things like that. So I find it fascinating. I don't know about you. Have you
Yeah, I
experimented with
feel
that?
well. I feel it's as good as what it's been fed, and if not enough of us who know and understand things like the fundamentals of child protection are feeding that perspective into what it's serving up, it's going to serve up more and more dangerous and difficult things. So I agree, we can't ignore it. We have to engage with it. So that's one simple reflection. People often, too much time is spent by childline counsellors recording conversations with children and young people as opposed to listening and supporting them. And the idea of them being able to draw on a really excellent AI base of knowledge and understanding, which might relate to previous calls and contacts with young people who are coming back to us more than one time, although it's a confidential service, so that's not as straightforward as it might sound. But if we could adjust the balance between time spent processing and time spent interpreting and engaging, that would be really good. So I'm quite excited about the potential that might afford, so long as we're in charge of the tech rather than the tech being in charge of us. And the only
Which is a
other
challenge.
immediate thought I've got in that context is that I do remember having a conversation with some folk at Deep Mind about this. Again, this is a few years ago, but they were saying there are many, many places to start in terms of codifying data, knowledge, and information to serve up quality stuff than beginning with conversations that you're having with children and young people, not least because they use the same words as us in different contexts and the
Yeah,
language is constantly changing. And so if you're not
evolving. Yeah,
careful, you won't pick up the kind of nuance and understanding of what the particular words mean in 2024. They mean something completely different from what they did when we were at school. So that needs a bit of care. But yeah, using it for the force of good as opposed to defaulting to it's bound to be
terrible.
dangerous and
Yeah.
terrible, probably the place to be.
Yeah, I'm really interested that, the point you made about data, anything's only as good as the data or the people who are engaging with the platform. And that just brings me back to, the sort of the big anti-Twitter sort of, I don't know what word to use of it, but how anti-Twitter everybody went after, around about the time of the riots. And then it was
Yeah,
really interesting because we at DSC, we sat down and we had a big conversation about this because everybody's saying, get off Twitter, it's a poisonous place, they're
yeah,
inciting riots, whatever. And, the truth is it has become a horrible environment in my experience. There's no question about that. But we had a big talk about it at DSC. And in the end, we decided not to leave it. We decided to stay on it. And there were a number of reasons for that. But one of the core reasons is that we were saying, we believe charities go into dark places. Charities are not frightened of nastiness. Like, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with they're ugly issues. They're nasty issues. They involve bad people doing bad things and behaving in a bad
yeah,
way. And if we just walk away from those spaces, we're kind of giving carte blanche to those people to live in those spaces. So we felt very much that we needed to keep being on there and putting out positive messages. And actually, the folk who engage with our DSC Twitter, it's generally really positive. They do engage very well. We don't actually get quite as much as the hate and the nastiness. It tends to be as an individual. God knows what's happened to my algorithms, but I get all sorts of rubbish now, which I'm fairly sure I don't follow those people. I've never followed them. But yeah, so I think Twitter for us became sort of a beacon of what our sector is about, actually. And of course, you will know that very well at NSPCC, because your people have to deal with some incredibly dark, horrible, evil spaces in order to do your work.
yeah. I think I agree with you very much. We've got to be where people are and step into those realms. But then you've got to feed the beast and be willing to live with the consequences of what you see and hear. And as I haven't left Twitter X, but nor have I really embraced it, because
Engaged.
as an individual, I think life is too short, and there are more effective ways of, of getting your message across. And a problem with that platform now is that you probably will have overwhelmingly nice people engaging with you, because the algorithms are only making what you're saying visible to the tiny number of people that are already engaging directly with you, whilst they continue to kind of pump all this stuff you really don't want to hear at you. So, fair play and kudos to National Trust and the RNLI, who, roll their sleeves up and really go for it, don't they?
I know,
when they've got something to say, there's two examples of charities who are brave enough to, get out there and give as good as they get. And I think you've got to be willing to do that. And as the NSPCC post Elon Musk taking over, we haven't devoted our
much time,
resource to that and time to that space, because we've been in everywhere else.
A lot of the crap on it, though, Peter, to be honest, is bots. An awful lot of the nastiness is either an actual bot that's automatically generated, or it's some, group of people somewhere causing trouble. Now, actually, and I think often we haven't put the context in of saying, if you look at a whole range of comments, you can always tell who the bots are. They've normally got numbers in them. There's never a photograph. There's normally some silly, very provocative name that they've chosen for themselves. They're very rarely real people, or at least they're a team of real people sat in some shady place somewhere, pumping out all this hate. But there's also the thing about whether you engage or not on Twitter, and do you argue back, which I personally tend not to do, because I don't think you can ever win an argument, and people get into and they misinterpret words, and so I don't think that's necessarily a super helpful thing to do. But I don't think the world is nearly as ugly as Twitter would have us believe it is. I think there are some people who have those awful views, but I don't think it's nearly as many as the impression we get. And certainly I think that part of the problem with platforms like that is the anonymity. Is that people will anonymously say things that they would never say in real life, and because it's anonymous, they're not kind of like self-managing what they're saying out loud, so they're not having to worry about the impact it has on other people. And I think that's a very important part of societal growth and development, is that when you're in a space where you see people, who you're talking to, you do monitor yourself, because most people don't actually want to hurt or offend other people.
Would
so
you require everyone to identify themselves on these sites then? Because we've thought about that as the NSPCC, and not supported that on the grounds that there are things which children and young people want to explore without divulging who they are. But there's a price to pay for that.
Yeah, well,
There's been some quite lively
how do you know
debates.
that's actually a young person? And not some, dirty person sat in a room somewhere masquerading as a 13-year-old girl. Yeah, so we don't police people's personal accounts. So our policy basically says, just please be careful if there's anything you say that could be associated with DSC, just think about that. Some of our staff do post on Twitter, and most of the time, if they're typically posting stuff for DSC, I think. Certainly we have a DSC account, which is the independent account, and obviously they're slightly more careful there. But it's interesting because I get social media. I think it's really important. I think it's really powerful. I'm not particularly a fan, and to be honest, once I retire, I'm highly unlikely to stay on it. I would have thought. I only do it really for DSC and for charities and for the messages that I want to get out there about hope in the world, and how awesome we all are, most of us anyway. So for example, I came off Facebook. The reason I came off Facebook was because I realized that I can handle anonymous people on Twitter who I don't know and have probably never met being mean and horrible about other people in life and what have you. But when it's your family and friends, the trouble is on Facebook is you discover things about what your family and friends think that actually, I don't want to know what you think about this issue. So I came off it straight away, because I found myself
Right.
looking at people I love through very different eyes when they like shared something that I think is outrageous or made some comment, you know, supporting something I thought was terrible. It was like I was like, I can't believe that person who I really thought was this awesome human being thinks that about whatever the issue was. So I came off it. It was doing my head in. It wasn't good for my mental health at all. So I don't do much, if
Mm.
any, personal social media at all, to be honest.
No, I originally went onto Twitter when I was at the big lottery fund because I just felt that all these amazing grants and awards we were making to extraordinary charities and community groups were getting zero press coverage, and I felt better by telling people about them myself, even if at the time
Yeah.
I had very few followers. So that was the original reason, and then I mean, this shows how long ago it was. I got a bonus at the lottery, and I thought, right, I'm going to donate this to charity somehow or other. So I said that I would pay £1 to children in need for every new follower that I got on Twitter, and that got retweeted by a couple of the celebrities who used to appear on the
Oh
lottery
no,
draw
Peter.
show. Before I knew it, I'd got 1,000 followers, but it cost me my bonus. But that was okay because it was going to go to charity
Anyway,
anyway.
yeah.
And once you get a certain number of followers, you're on your way. But there's a scandal, you know. Wanless buys his followers on social media.
Let's hope nobody from the Mail is listening in, Peter. It would be, you know, does
It was a
that
long
count
time
as,
ago.
you know, cash for favours? I don't know what it would be like that. Yeah. It's a challenging environment, isn't it? And I think because I think that about young people, because you do hear people, especially at our sort of age now, Peter, and sort of slightly older, have this quite negative still view. Like young people, they don't work hard. They expect the world to be given to them. They're a bit lazy. They're living at home with their parents, expecting to be looked after, etc. And it's really funny because I came across a thread a few years ago where some chap he'd gone back and he'd looked over the headlines, everything been written about children since the first time there was printed information. So
Right.
gone right the way back to 15 something or other, and every decade of all the centuries were the exact same story. Young people today, they don't respect their elders, they don't work hard enough, they think like literally nothing changes. I'm terrified that I'm going to turn into that person. I'm going to get, because it's so interesting. You sort of get to this age and all of a sudden you're very negative about young people. Whereas I think the young people today, largely, of course, not in every case, but I'm quite in awe of them. How open they are to new things, and how less judgmental they can be about other things, compared. So when I was growing up, we were taught a very clear way of thinking, and I think quite closed really to new ideas and stuff like that. Whereas the young people today, I don't know whether that relates back to technology, but they just seem to me to be so much, like, I was going to say, better informed. Sometimes the thinking isn't particularly sophisticated. I think last week, or was it this week, Peter? I can't remember. You talked about critical thinking and the importance of teaching people how to critically assess the information they're being given. So I suspect there's probably a little bit more of that that's needed. But I personally find them amazing. I genuinely do. I'm in awe. I don't,
Yeah.
and if ever, Peter, in our relationship over the years to come as we get even older, if you ever find me saying something, like young people today don't realize what it's like, please, for God's sake, I give you permission to commit violence upon my person to get my head back in the right place.
Yes, I probably feel the same. Well, we are exactly the same age, and I do spend time pondering why young people feel so strongly about certain uh, issues, particularly equality, diversity, and inclusion,
Yeah,
and belonging type issues are super popular on our
aren't they? Yeah,
intranet, and anyone who's sharing insights and knowledge about those things mobilizes a great deal of interest, compared with um, some of the things that people might be saying about the direct impact we are having as a charity. And I think some of that is a sort of age thing in terms of what really matters. And of course, these things matter, but yeah, that surprises me. And one of the best things of this job is the opportunity to engage with young people, though, and they're
yeah,
always full of ideas and innovative and sometimes completely obvious when you stop to think about it, insights into what needs to be done to keep children safe online and how to engage and involve them in the debates and discussions is really important. So yeah, we're probably on the same page there.
Same page there, yeah.
Both feeling a bit sort of past it.
Yeah. Well, actually, sort of to end this on that thing is, when we inevitably end up in the care home, Peter,
Yeah,
I really, really hope that we're not subjected to Vera Lynn and, 50s music, because actually our generation, the music we'll be wanting to listen to is David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, that kind of era. But there's kind of, there feels like a weird anomaly for me in thinking about a bunch of, us being a lot older, sat in a care home with people playing Led Zeppelin or as opposed to White Cliffs of Dover. I hope that's the case, Peter, because I hope it's just not like once you get to 70 or 80,
yeah.
you're forced to listen. Not that Dame Vera Lynn isn't awesome, but
No,
you're forced to listen to the songs of your grandparents' youth.
but we are further from David Bowie and Ziggy Stardust now than we were from Vera Lynn when that song came out, and that
Oh,
is
Peter.
scary, isn't
And
it?
on that
And
depressing note,
even yeah, yeah, we'll stop
I think
another week.
we will stop. Yeah. Oh, that was good
Okay.
fun with all sorts of topics. So thanks everybody for listening. And Peter, see you next time. And I'm expecting
Yes.
now to see more of the shirts.
Okay. And if people have got ideas about topical issues that you would like us to kind of surface, particularly if they're going to cause us to argue with one another,
Yeah,
then let us know and
that.
we'll have a go.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for
Oh,
listening, everyone.
bye.